Redditors, what is your biggest "I shouldn't have said that" moment right after you said it? So, my brother and I worked at a fast food restaurant. The one type of new burger we served took 15 minutes to cook, so often we would have to tell customers and suggest they find a table to wait if they were willing. Well, my brother was working cash and this person in a wheelchair decided to wait. My brother was like, "It'll be a while for it to be done. I'll bring it to your table when it's ready if you just want to take a seat, sir. I mean, pull up a chair. Oh, crap." But thankfully, the person had a good sense of humor, but holy crap, it was funny watching him put his foot in his mouth repeatedly. Next story. I went to my uncle's funeral a couple of days ago. As we were about to leave to go to it, we were wondering what family would be there. Without thinking, I said, "I wonder if Uncle Steve will be there. That's who the funeral was for." Right away, I was like, oh my god, why did I say that? Next story. A number of years ago, my wife was complaining about being overweight. She wasn't overweight at all, though. So, in an attempt to comfort her, I put a hand on her shoulder and I said, "You'd be perfect if I was blind." Her reaction is not what I had in mind. Next story. My wife and we were going somewhere, and she says to me, "Do I look okay?" And she was wearing brownish capris, a light-colored camisole, and a brownish shirt over it. I tried to come up with something cute and brown, so I said, "Like a potato." And it is now the basis for all clothing-related questions 20-ish years later. She says to me, "Do I look like a potato in this?" Next story. Was in high school working fast food. It was slow on the line, so me and the girl working were talking. She was complaining about her weight, so without really thinking, I said, "Oh, come on, you're not that fat." And I knew how badly I had screwed up before finishing the sentence. She stormed off. In my defense, she really wasn't that fat. Next story. I was in the car with my parents and my mom turned around and told me to put my seatbelt on. I responded by saying that I wouldn't and I hoped I would die in a car crash or something to that extent. I don't remember the exact words or why I even said it, but the whole car went silent. And as if the initial comment wasn't that bad, I painfully remembered that my father's first wife and unborn child were killed in a car accident on their wedding night some 40 years ago. I'm also her namesake. See, folks, this is why I do not bring out the dark humor with mom and dad, because they don't get it. They're not part of that generation, okay? Dark humor wasn't invented until 2005. Anyway, next story. So, I made someone cry by accident. A friend of mine told me her grandmother passed away recently and how much she was struggling to cope with that. So later that day, we were discussing about a school-related project with some other friends. We were not going to finish our project before the deadline, so I jokingly said, "Well, what if we pretend someone's family member died, and that's why we couldn't focus that well?" And right after saying that, I looked at my friend who began to tear up a bit. I immediately thought, oh crap, that's right. I'm an idiot. Next story. My mom was in the hospital. As it turns out, she would never leave the hospital. But at this stage, she was sick, but not that sick. She had a private room with a little enclosed garden outside. She had a blue-tongue lizard who lived in the garden, and she would pass her long days watching the lizard scurry around and catch bugs and lazing in the sun. She would tell us every time we visited what the lizard had been up to, the funny things it had done and made her smile during the day. She lit up when telling me about its adventures. One day when I came in to visit, the blue tongue was out front of her room in the car park. It had been hit by a car and killed. I went to visit my mom and she was very sad. She hadn't seen her friend the lizard all day. I said to her, "Oh yeah, I saw him out in the car park. He won't be back. He got run over by a car." And as soon as I said it, I tried to suck the words back in, but I couldn't. Her face crashed. She was crushed. I tried to say maybe it was another lizard or that her lizard would be back, but it was no good. The damage was done. A week later, she died. She had been in the hospital for 3 months and was getting better, they thought, but this day, she just died. They thought she had just given up. That was in 1996, 22 and a bit years ago, and I still wake up from sleep thinking about that. I still shudder every time I recall how stupid I had been. I'm now a 50-year-old man, and I can never and will never forgive myself for that stupid statement. It still makes me cry. Next story. My boss gave me some really menial crap work to do when he knew I was too busy for it. He was being a lazy ass and didn't want to do it himself. I literally grabbed one of his hands and looked hard at it. He took his hand back and asked what I was doing, and I looked him dead in the face and I said, "Your hands look fine." 3 other coworkers were around there and tried their hardest not to burst out laughing. Pretty much as I was saying it, I regretted it. Next story. Business school interview over Skype. They were very interested in a global conference I was helping organize, and suddenly asked me, "What would you do in the event of a terrorist attack?" Blanking out, first thing out of my mouth was, "Well, that event's going to be a bomb." I didn't get in. Next story. I was doing work at the family farm when our mom's insurance rep was visiting. I overheard them explaining her benefits, that the insurance will pay out at death or age 100. My mom said, "I'm pretty sure my time will come before I'm 100. And I said, "If not, we'll just take you out back and put you down." The insurance guy looked like a deer in headlights. My 80-year-old mom then got up and chased me down laughing to give me a fake spanking. Edit. My mom just called actually, and we revisited that moment and laughed again. Next story. Coworker and I were stocking shelves and chatting one day, and he asked me if I saw the 9/11 commemorative shoes that Nike was releasing. And I said, "What, are they covered in rubble or something?" And I realized as soon as it was coming out that I was surrounded by 4 customers and a really uptight older rich white community. So that went over really well. Of course, Karen wants to see my manager. No write-up though, thankfully. Next story. I used to teach Bible school. We were talking about faith or some crap, I don't know what happened, but my dumb self thought it would be perfect to say, "Jesus is kind of like Santa." Cue multiple kids saying, "Does that mean Jesus isn't real?" Then cue even more, "Wait, Santa isn't real?" I didn't enjoy teaching Bible school anyways. Okay, so first off, Santa is real. I don't know what OP is going on about. Second, Jesus is real if you choose to personally believe so, because I'm not touching religion in this video. And third, wrestling is real. Hulk Hogan lifted Eric Andre the Giant, who was 8,000 pounds, and body slammed him in front of 400,000 Hulkamaniacs live in front of the galaxy. Next story. So we had a friend of the family, my grandma's lifelong friend, who was labeled as the crazy cat lady. She had several dozen cats, most were feral and lived outside, but occasionally she'd nurse and tame sick kittens when they came around, and they'd become inside cats. Most had feline AIDS and left snotty marks on the walls from the constantly sick cats sneezing on them. The whole house reeked of ammonia from the dozen litter boxes she placed in her open garage and basement. But anyway, she was a kind lady, and after her husband passed away, it became my dad's personal responsibility to make sure all of her heavy lifting was taken care of. So after all these years of sick cats and ignoring warnings from friends, naturally she gets bit, and it gets infected. It was horrific. It just kept getting worse and worse to the point her foot had to be amputated. But cut to the point, one day my dad volunteers me to help him clean the litter and power wash the garage. I'm a jerk teenager at the time, so naturally I complain about the smell that makes me sick, and I hate cats, so why do I have to be the one to blah 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 blah? I'm an entitled prick. So he informs me we need to help now more than ever because the infection caused a chain reaction of health problems, and she might not last much longer, despite her sunny disposition to everything going on. To which I respond, "So, you could say she has a foot in the grave?" And I've never seen my dad look so disappointed. Next story. I was at a rehearsal with an opera singer who was blind, accompanying her as a part of a string quartet. The venue was pretty cramped and they didn't bring any stands for the music, so they set them up on chairs. I didn't bring my glasses that day and was squinting a little bit to read the music. So the audio technician asks me if the setup is okay, to which I reply, "It's okay, I'm just blind." And the worst part is, everyone gives me a weird look. But I keep trucking on because I didn't even realize until 10 minutes later when I get the realization that I called myself blind in front of an actually blind person. She was very nice about it though, but it was still mortifying. Next story. So I had never heard of the rapper XXXTentacion before. When he died, a friend of mine posted on social media some post saying "RIP XXXTentacion," and I thought it was some adult content site going offline, and my friend really wanted to express his love for it. So I replied with, "Lol bro, rest in peace." And some other friend said, "Well, that's harsh. Why would you say that?" To which I, still thinking adult content, replied again and said, "'Cause who cares? There are other ones out there." Well, turns out there was a lot of shady politics around the rapper, and a bunch of people I knew started arguing after me. Some calling me sick for praising someone's death, no matter who. Others calling me a hero for standing up against bullcrap rappers or something. It was a whole thing between the lot of them. And I was just thinking, adult content, you know? Next story. Me and my friends were having a group photo session for prom at one of our houses. Everyone's parents were there taking photos of their daughters or sons with the dates they had. I was going alone, and one of the parents asked me who I was going with. I immediately blurted out, "My right hand," and dads were holding back laughter. Moms were standing there shocked. Good times all around. Next story. I was picking up my daughter from my wife who was in a work meeting. The meeting consisted of a bunch of the managers from the local area, and the district manager was doing the meeting. We both work at the same company, so I know who he is, and he's a great guy that is pretty reasonable. On my way out of the meeting, he says to me, "See you later, Dad." And just out of pure instinct to say something funny, the words, "That's daddy to you," slipped out of my mouth. Next story. I was once getting a fine for jaywalking. The cop was going on about safety and how it's for my own good. "Why do you think we're doing this?" is a rhetorical question. Me, being me and having a bad habit of answering rhetorical questions, I said, "Revenue raising?" And so the cop, my friend, and I all just kind of had a look on our faces of, that just happen? And the cop asked me what I said, and I was like, "Oh, nothing." And he knew exactly what I said, but proceeded to go on a rant about it. Okay, y'all, that cop did not pass the vibe check. Some cops are cool, they're funny, they got senses of humor. This guy wants to give you a lecture and a PowerPoint about jaywalking? What a nerd. Take his gun away, give him a baton instead until he learns to stop being such a weenie. Anyway, next story. So, my brother got a twofer when our grandmother had a leg amputated. We went to visit her the day afterwards. During the conversation, we were talking about how expensive the hospital visits can be, and without thinking, he said to her, "I bet this visit is going to cost you an arm and a leg." Not even 5 minutes later, he asked about the recovery time, then phrased it like, "How long will it take you to get back on your feet?" Thankfully, my family has a warped sense of humor and we just laughed at this. Next story. I wait tables for morning shift. There are two parts to the restaurant I work at, the dining room and the dessert counter for carryout. These two girls come in and are seated in the dining room. Instead of ordering with me, they head to the counter and order drinks. I deliver the drinks and immediately one girl comes at me so full of attitude that her order is incorrect, and that our staff is rude. It's still really early in the morning, and I'm in dire need of a vacation, but I bite my tongue and I tell her I will fix it. I go back to my counter that made the drinks and ask him to remake them. He's not happy about it, but remakes the drinks once we find the ticket proving he read it wrong. I go to the girls' table and tell them the drink is being remade. They are continuing to be rude and catty, to the point I am responding with whiny politeness. Then, after having problems communicating with them, one of the girls says to me, "I don't know what that problem is." And then this is where I messed up. Remember, I am in need of a vacation. I replied, "The problem is your attitude." Inside my head, I just cringed and yelled no. The girl exclaimed, "Excuse me?" And I decided to just own it, and I went with it. I've been at my job for a while, and I know I'm not about to lose it, so I repeated what I had said to her. She and her friend got mad at me and decided to leave. Take your $12 order at 7 a.m. and shove it, you overly catty. See you next Tuesday. And side note, I did not get in trouble, by the way. They had been rude and disrespectful to any of the staff they encountered. Next story. This was said by my husband, but I could see the look on his face. I was 9 months pregnant. We went grocery shopping when we saw another pregnant lady. And I said, "Oh, she's wearing the same pregnancy pants as I do." My husband looked at me in disbelief and answered, "Really? Well, hers must be a way smaller size then." I think I was mad at him for like 4 days. Next story. Following my grandmother's funeral, the family, extended and all, piled into the rented upstairs of a bar to toast, drink, commemorate, It was my turn to buy a round, and I head up to the bar, and one of my cousins does too, totally unrelated, and he says to me, "Hi, OP, how are you?" And without thinking, I replied to the question the same way I always do. I'm alive." And we just stared for a second and a half before I mumbled, "I shouldn't have said that." Next story. When I was 7 years old, I was hanging out with my sister and her friend. Her friend had really bad acne. They were about 16 years old. I remember looking at her friend and asking, "What are all those bumps all over your face?" She walked away crying shortly afterwards. I felt really bad knowing I hurt her feelings, but not knowing how. But I had almost the exact same thing happen to me when I was an acne-covered teenager. Made me laugh thinking about it. Next story. When I was in 4th grade or so, I heard what I thought was an utterly hilarious joke from Air and Space. I can still remember it. It involved a pilot with a speech impediment and his reaction to the tower guys accidentally making a comment about it. I thought it was the funniest thing on earth. So at school, I figured I'd tell it to the teacher I liked most, the computer teacher, who also had a speech impediment. And I felt my heart fall into my shoes as he stared at me blankly and then went back to work. I knew I'd effed up bad. I also knew I had no idea how to save the situation, and he barely, if ever, talked to me again. I was at that school until 8th grade. Maybe there were situations that were more severe, or more important, or more damaging, but this one is the one that's still stuck in my brain 20 years later. Edit. Fine, since you guys want to hear the joke. Remember, I was like 9-ish, so to me this was the funniest thing ever to idiot young me, and I had no idea that was what you would latch onto. But anyway, a bunch of pilots were training at mock sub-hunting runs out in the Pacific. Each pilot had a radio operator for them, but the operators could hear each other and the pilots in the control center. At one point, one of the radio operators turned to one of his friends and said, "I swear my pilot sounds just like Elmer Fudd," because the pilot had a speech problem. It briefly goes dead silent in the room as he hadn't turned off his microphone. He stares at it for a few seconds until the pilot says quietly, "Be very, very quiet. We are hunting submarines." Next story. I had just been rejected for a date by a friend of mine that I asked out. I asked her out to dinner, and she suggested that we bring a third mutual friend with us. I said I'd rather not, and that this was me asking her on a date more than anything. She declined. And then I screwed up. I texted said mutual friend because I felt I could talk to her about anything, telling her that I asked out the other on a date and that she rejected me. I don't remember exactly how it went, but I think she asked me what happened and how I felt about it, and I was answering her. At some point, I ended up saying I was frustrated about this, and that being friends with the girl I asked out feels like being a dog with a piece of meat being teased in front of his face, I said. But then the mutual friend was like, "What the F? Why would you say something like that?" and revealed that to her best friend, the girl I asked out on a date, who was sitting right next to her watching the conversation unfold. I will never live that down. I will always have that night in the back of my mind torturing me. Those two were indeed the best friends I ever had, and I ruined it, and there's no turning back or making what I said go away. If such a thing is possible, I ruined my own reputation forever. Neither of them have communicated with me at all for about 5 years now. I miss them. Okay, I'm sorry, but OP said something that was wrong, but nowhere near at the levels of "what the F is wrong with you? I'm going to show this to another person" levels of wrong at all. The dude made one incorrect dialogue option and she said, "Hey Sarah, look at this private conversation we're having." That's messed up. I suppose, though, in hindsight, maybe she's not the best person to vent to, because I was kind of like, maybe you don't do that, but it's still, that's messed up on them. I feel bad for OP. Again, not the best wording in the world, but it's really not that egregious. We've all said incorrect things. This whole video is about this, but this one annoys me. Anyway, next story. So, I said it to a homeschooled 16-year-old coworker when I overheard her say something about hanging out with friends. And I said, "You're homeschooled. How do you have friends?" She and some other coworkers laughed, but I immediately felt bad about it. I apologized a few minutes later. She said it was fine and it sounded genuine, but I still felt really bad about it. Next story. I was a server at a restaurant when I was 20 years old. A pregnant woman came in, and I said something along the lines of, "Wow, you're really getting big. The big day must be close." And then she said, "Actually, I'm only 6 months along." Surprised, I responded with, "Oh, must be twins then, right?" And she glared at me and said, "No, but you can stop talking now." Next story. The shirt of a girl in my class had a button open by accident, and you could see her bra. I didn't want to tell her that it was open because that would have meant I looked. Later, she noticed it and said out loud, "Wait, how long has my shirt been open like that?" And I, as a genius, then unintentionally said, "Too long," a bit too loud. Next story. I live in the American South, and at my work, one of the clients was not feeling well, but it was my job to inspire him to exercise. I made mention to him that we needed to get started, that I was not going to be a slave driver that day anyway. Well, he is dark and I am Caucasian, and I immediately looked at him after I said it, thinking, "Oh crap!" He was cool and ignored it though. Although I said it innocently and I meant not to offend, he could have been bothered by it, and it was inconsiderate of me to say that. I haven't said it since. Now, as time went on and we worked together for several months, I got to know him pretty well. I was luckier than I thought because, as it turns out, not too long before I began working with him, he had gotten out of prison for time served after a murder conviction. I almost crapped myself when he shared that little bit of information. I checked it with my boss, and he wasn't lying. Next story. You know the whole Napoleon Dynamite, your mom goes to college joke? Well, my friends and I would say, "Your mom," fill in the blank, to each other all the time as a reply when someone said something dumb. Unfortunately, I became the dumb person when my friend, whose mom had passed away just a couple of weeks before, said something, and I instinctively responded with, "Your mom," and trailed off into nothingness, hoping nobody would notice. Next story. All right, Reddit, here's my time to shine. So I was waiting on this table of a sweet older couple. I noticed earlier in the meal the man had on a hand brace thingamabob because he was missing a finger. Yep, you see where this is going, don't you? Well, fast forward to the end of their meal, I go to check on them, offer dessert, all of that jazz, and I go to grab his empty plate. What I say next is what I have always said to tables to be corny because I've had people snap at me, so I just want to be clear before I dump their last few crumbs in the trash that they are done. I say, "Can I grab this out of your way, sir?" And he says, "Absolutely, I'm stuffed." Gotta ask though, wouldn't want to lose a finger. And oh God, what have I done? It's lose a hand, you dumbass. But anyway, my face probably turned beet red. The wife laughed and the old man did not and put his head down. I brought them their check, they tipped just fine and left. That was 4 years ago, and it is my worst foot and mouth moment ever. I still wonder to this day if it was a recent injury and he was self-conscious because he didn't laugh and didn't show his hand after that. Still haunts me when I wait on amputees. Next story. I figured out when I was about 8 that my mom must have been pregnant when she got married because there was only a 5-month gap between my parents' anniversary and my sister's birthday. Shortly after I figured it out, I got mad at my mom and called her an S-word. I knew as the words were leaving my mouth that not only was that terribly mean, but I was in big trouble. My mom, though, said nothing. I slunk to my room, and when my dad came home, I took that whooping. I am still ashamed of myself, and I never resented my dad for that whooping. Edit to clarify, this was the 70s and those ideas and words were common. My sister was in middle school and used the word all the time. My parents did make me go to church, so the premarital sex taboo may have come from there. We all got spankings back then. My dad did so rarely. Next story. Was in a physics lab in high school, doing it in groups of 3. This lab required a Bunsen burner. These run on propane gas. My 2 friends and I, all of us having blonde hair and blue eyes, were working together on the prep when the teacher asked, "Hey, do you guys need the gas turned on?" To which I responded, "Sir, we're of the Aryan squad. Of course we want the gas." Not one of my brightest moments. Next story. I'm at dinner with my family and my mom says, "Why don't you take your girlfriend with you on your bike?" And I say, "Well, it can only support 150 kilograms. Then I realized that what I said could be misunderstood. Looked at my girlfriend and somehow my look made it even worse and they all started laughing. What I was gonna say is that it can only support 150 kilograms and I alone am almost that, jokingly making a fat joke about myself. Next story. A guy I worked with who I knew solely at work, but on a pretty personal level mentioned he may be getting divorced. A couple of days later, I saw his car a few houses down the street from me and asked if he lived there the following day at work. He said he did, so I had never known he lived that close to me. Then, one day, I saw this nice all-black 68 Camaro SS parked outside. Couldn't wait to talk to him about it. I say, "Bro, you got a 68 Camaro? Why haven't we ever talked about that crap? You know I love cars." Then he says to me, "Psh, I wish I had a Camaro. What are you talking about?" And I say, "There's no way I effed up the type of car I saw. The one outside your house. The all-black one." And that's when I knew I effed up. And he found out his wife was cheating on him. That's a good one. That's awful, but that's so good. Oh, that's so funny. Anyway, next story. So, my ex-boss once called us into a meeting and said that she noticed that our morale was low and she was wondering why. Everyone exchanged looks, but no one wanted to say it. She pressed us, and finally I said, "Because you're so negative all the time." I could tell by the looks of my coworkers that I'd said something bad. It was the truth, though. Moral of the story, bosses don't like being told the truth. She blamed me for some mistake that her husband did and fired me very shortly after that. I don't care, though. She was a B-word. Next story. I was coming home from an Afghanistan deployment years ago, and I had my backpack absolutely stuffed to the extent that I felt if you moved the zipper an inch, everything would just come flying out. Well, I'm going through customs at the airport, and I walk up to the TSA agent and put my bag on the table in front of her. She reaches for the zipper, and I say, "Careful, that thing might explode on you." And I knew instantly and started to stumble out in explanation, but she just said, "That's probably not a good thing to say at an airport." Luckily, she knew right away that I was just an idiot and carried on. Next story. We had this old lady who worked in the office of my university. She was an absolute B-word to everyone and everything. Rude and clearly hated her job. But she was in control of the things like the fax machine. I had a long application for a job that took a year back in college. I was always sending faxes of important files and had to deal with her regularly. Every single time she gave me crap. Yelled at me for putting the papers the wrong way, yelled at me for telling her she was putting the papers in the wrong way, yelled at me for interrupting her work. Finally, one day I came in and she was yelling at a student for something. He left in a huff. She sat down and I came to use the fax machine. As I'm asking, she puts her finger in my face and starts a call to her friend or something. I see a girl on the seats waiting and I look at her and mouth, "What a B-word." "That's my mom," she says to me. Next story. Called a current girlfriend by an ex's name. One evening, I was on the phone with my girlfriend at the time. I'd smoked a bit before because I wasn't expecting to talk to her until later, so I was kind of stoned. I forgot exactly what we were talking about, but in the process, I called her by my ex-girlfriend's name. As soon as I said that, I bit my fist because I knew that was bad. She really didn't like my ex, and I know it really bothered her to be called by her name. She stayed quiet for a bit as I apologized profusely. Eventually, she got over it, but I could tell it bugged her for the next couple of days. In my defense, though, I was stoned. We'd only been dating for a few months at that time, and their names were really similar. Two-syllable names that ended the same way. Next story. When I was a young lass with no filter, I worked with a woman that we will call Judy. Judy was late 50s to early 60s, had immigrated here from Austria during the war, and she was quite conservative. She comes in the day after Christmas with this massive rock her husband had bought to celebrate something like 25 years of marriage. Before my brain even realized what was happening, I exclaimed out loud, "Damn, how many times you have to swallow for that one, Judy?" The horror on my face matched her own. I apologized immediately, but I probably ruined that ring for her. Next story. My ex called the cops on me when I was drinking from midnight till 7 a.m. We had a non-physical argument. She just didn't like how I was laughing bullcrap away. "I'm gonna call the cops." Go ahead, see if I effing care. Then the cops show up. I'm drunk. She lets them in and I'm like, "Whoa, you can't come in here. This is my effing house. She had no rights to let you in." We argue back and forth. They start saying they should just arrest me, and that's when I went bananas. You ever hear the 4th and 14th Amendments? You are violating my rights just for being here. I can't leave because public intoxication and DUI, and here I'm breaking no laws. Is her face battered? Is the house in disarray? One of the cops was the shift commander, white shirt. There were 4 total. Then I say the kids are gone to school. If anyone should leave, it should be her. She's sober and causing the effing fight. Maybe you should arrest her for false reporting of a crime, which is me enjoying some beers inside my house. The cops then huddled, the white shirt directed them out, and all was well. The ex, bewildered, says to me, "You're effing nuts, you know that?" And I said, "Yeah. Remember, the next time you want to involve armed a-holes into my house, it might not go so well." Next story. I was working with my coworker, and she had a daughter just come home from the hospital after they found a tick on her. Being a worried mother must be hard, so I guess I didn't read the room right. She said that her daughter now has to be on antibiotics, and I then said, "Isn't it ironic that she now has to be on antibiotics? Huh? Nah, she wasn't impressed. Next story. I told an emergency room patient, middle-aged, and his mother that a CT angio chest was a fairly standard test for serious shortness of breath. The test goes fairly quickly, and I'll bring him back to his ER room in like 10 to 15 minutes. This was in the middle of the night. Well, the patient coded on my CT table and died, with the ED doctor trying to resuscitate in CT with a crew of nurses. Pulmonary embolism. Guy was just a tick shy of my 500 pounds weight limit as well. Not the first patient to die in front of me by any means, but the only time I've said I'll bring them back. Now I say a rough timeline in how long the test takes. Saw the mom in the hallway later sobbing. Next story. Late to the party, but totally worth a mention. My 8th grade science teacher suggested he bring in his cat for everyone to meet. In my eternal wisdom, I said, "We should kill it and eat it." And I immediately knew I effed up. The whole class went dead quiet. And he was former military and had no qualms with calling me out, and rightfully so. And he immediately said, "What in God's name is the F wrong with you?" or something to that effect. I almost died from embarrassment. I mustered an apology but knew that wasn't going to be the last of it. Later that day during my lunch, my name was called over the intercom to come down to the principal's office. I was basically grilled by all of my teachers and the principal about whether everything was okay at home, whether I often had thoughts of hurting animals or others. So I had to spend the hour convincing everyone I wasn't a homicidal maniac. Just awful, man. I even had a cat at home that I loved to bits too, so I have no idea where the impetus to say that even came from. She's still with us now. I'm 25 now, and I still cringe thinking about it. But I also still say stupid crap, so there's plenty of new fodder to feel embarrassed about. Never low on supply. Next story. Was talking to a black guy friend and a female friend of mine. We were talking about our types, what we found attractive and unattractive. I confided in them that I think mustaches are really creepy, and really emphasized how creepy I feel they are. Immediately noticed my female friend going in to hug our guy friend. Wondered why, and then immediately noticed he had a mustache that I just didn't notice because it wasn't as noticeable on a black guy as a black mustache on a white guy would be. My unobservant ass immediately felt terrible. I apologized, but I know I still hurt his feelings. Next story. Someone I know is related by blood to Marcus Allen's ex-wife, Catherine. They are super close to her. If you don't know who they are, some people believe O.J. Simpson killed Nicole because of her affair with Marcus while he was married to Catherine. I'm pretty sure he's publicly denied their affair, but it's still out there. She's Catherine Edwards on Real Housewives now. And anyway, we were at a wedding recently with that person, and we were talking about things that everyone knows is true, but can't prove it. Well, I completely forgot who I was with, and I said something like, just like everyone knows OJ did it, and cue the awkward pause, and the look my fiance gave me like he wanted to kill me too. We all just pretended like I didn't say anything, but I cannot look at that person to this day without cringing. Next story. I work at a large law firm, so instead of bosses, we have a partnership. I was taking a call from a partner's office, and after the call ended, the partner was chatting with me and one other associate. We were discussing fees for the client and how we were undercharging them. The partner said jokingly, "No worries, we can make it up with OP's year-end bonus." And I immediately blurted out, "Yeah, what little there is of it." Instant regret. I tried to salvage it with a "just kidding," but the damage was done. And it wasn't even like the bonus was small. It was just that I had started in September, so my bonus was going to be prorated for the year. Very cringeworthy moment. Next story. Now that's a nice big ass. The only time in my life I have ever actually uttered out loud a set of words that was both sexist and could be considered demeaning to another person. Normally, I am very conscientious about what I say and who I say it to. So anyway, I moved into line at the deli counter. In front of me was a woman with the most glorious, once-in-a-lifetime ass, or at least to me, that I had ever seen. And part of my brain that determines proper mouth movement just failed. So I said, "Now that's a nice big ass." And she turned around and looked at me and probably saw the horrified look on my face and smiled. I was so taken aback. I apologized. I stammered. I tried to tell her I shouldn't have said it, meant a fantastic, wonderful jaw-dropping ass, and just made a complete fool out of myself. It was right out of a comedy skit. Well, she ended up being a great person though. Accepted that this was a one-time I can't believe that slipped out moment, and I see her fairly often at the supermarket. And we're both married, so no funny business. She confided in me once that her husband doesn't like her big ass, and she was very pleased to get the compliment, although me not looking like an obvious perv helped. It could have gone really bad though. You know, it's a scientifically proven thing that when you see someone really attractive, your brain will just kind of melt sometimes. It happened to me once. I've never experienced it before. But I want to share a personal story of mine that relates to this video. So we were in a group in high school, and I was talking to some friends, and we were talking about grandfather clocks for some reason. And I look over to this person. I say, "Do you have a grandfather clock?" "No." "Do you have a grandfather clock?" "No." "Do you have a father?" "Oh." And I pointed to a friend of mine whose dad died earlier that year, months ago, and he was back in school and had partially recovered from it, but he just looked at me and he's like, "F you, man," and he smiled about it, and I was like, oh my god. We were close though, and we have dark senses of humor, but I don't know why I stopped on him. He was chill about it, but I recoil in that to this day. So that's my story relating to the video. But anyway, guys, feel free to share yours. Thank you all so much for watching, commenting. Have a really good day, and bye-bye.